Today I will tell you about the Thanksgiving night when my daughter believed she could erase me with a single sentence. The house in Queen Anne was dressed for a magazine spread. Linen pressed without a crease, crystal glasses lined like soldiers, and the pumpkin pie still warm, filling the air with cinnamon and nutmeg. Through the bay window, Elliott Bay glimmered, as if mocking the scene inside. We gathered as we had for years, though something in the air was already sharp, like a blade hidden under velvet. My daughter Sloane sat at the center, her posture perfect, her lipstick dark against the soft light. To her right, her husband Colin wore his tailored suit as armor. To her left, Vivian, her mother-in-law, whose eyes scanned the table like a critic judging every detail. And across from me, Lily, my granddaughter, looked down at her plate, too young to carry the weight she already sensed pressing on the room. The clinking of silverware softened, then stopped. Sloane raised her glass, her smile deliberate. She leaned slightly forward, and though she whispered, it was just loud enough for everyone to hear. "We've decided you're done." The words landed like a verdict. No explanation, no kindness, not even the courtesy of a discussion. Around the table, eyes dropped, shoulders stiffened, and not a single voice rose in my defense. Even the family dog lifted his head from under the table, as if unsettled by the sudden coldness. I did not flinch. My hands moved with the steadiness of someone who had been underestimated too many times. From my leather bag, I drew a cream envelope, its seal still fresh from that morning at exactly 9:03. I set it down next to the pumpkin pie, the sound gentle but final. "Here is one last thing," I said, my voice calm, measured. "From the woman who funded your comfort." The chandeliers above threw soft light across the table, but it could not brighten the silence that followed. Forks stilled in midair. A spoon slipped and struck porcelain with a hollow ring. No one reached for dessert. No one asked for coffee. The feast had soured in an instant. Sloane's hand, steady a moment before, trembled as her fingers hovered over the envelope. She had expected me to bow my head. She had not expected me to fight with paper and ink. Vivian shifted in her chair, lips pressed thin. Colin adjusted his tie, buying himself time though none was left to buy. And Lily, my granddaughter, glanced at me with wide eyes, a silent question trembling in her stare. I met her gaze with a faint smile, steadying her in a way I could not steady the others. In that silence, thicker than any storm I had ever weathered, the message was clear. I was not done, and the comfort they believed permanent had just been weighed and found wanting. The feast turned bitter. The morning of Thanksgiving, before a single plate was set on the long table in Queen Anne, I drove into downtown Seattle. The streets were damp from an overnight drizzle. The gray sky pressed low over the city. My destination was clear. King County Notary first, then the law office of Ruth Delgado. I knew what I had to do, and hesitation was no longer an option. The notary office was quiet, almost clinical, the smell of toner and stale coffee heavy in the air. The clerk glanced up when I entered, her eyes flicking to the documents under my arm. I laid them on the counter, steady, purposeful. The clerk adjusted her glasses and slid the papers toward her, then reached for the notary stamp. The sound was sharp and final when the red seal hit the page, a deep thud that carried weight far beyond ink. My breath stayed calm. The stamp was not just approval. It was a weapon. I left the office with the papers tucked neatly inside a cream envelope. It was only 9:00. From there, I walked a block to Ruth Delgado's office. The building faced 3rd Avenue, its lobby lined with cold marble and glass. Ruth had been Malcolm's attorney for more than 30 years. She was precise, deliberate, a woman who wasted no words. When I stepped into her office, she rose from behind her desk, her silver hair pulled back tight, her navy suit pressed like steel. She gestured for me to sit. On the table between us lay the thick folder of trust documents, annotated in her neat handwriting. Caleb Foster, the estate manager, was already there. He nodded politely, laptop open, his fingers poised to type. Ruth adjusted her glasses and spoke directly. "Mrs. Bennett, the trust is governed under a springing power clause. That means your authority activates only under certain conditions. breach of fiduciary duty, misuse of funds, or deliberate misrepresentation. She tapped her pen against the margin where the clause was highlighted. Based on the evidence Caleb gathered, all three apply. Caleb turned his screen toward me. Emails, wire transfers, withdrawals labeled as administrative but traced to shell companies. Lake Union CPA confirmed irregularities, he said. Bellevue Bank flagged unusual transfers, and San Mateo's firm noted discrepancies in quarterly reporting. His voice was calm but firm. He clicked send. 3 emails left the outbox, each subject line carrying the same words, notice of irregularities. Ruth continued, her tone crisp. We freeze the trust first. That prevents further misuse. Then we file dissolution with King County Superior Court. Once dissolution is granted, all allocations are restructured. She placed a single page in front of me, signature line waiting. Today, you decide. Freeze, file, and move forward, or stay silent and watch them drain what you built. I studied the page. My pulse was steady, not from calm, but from clarity. I had spent decades supporting Malcolm in silence, raising Sloan in the comfort of stability, enduring Vivian's critiques, Colin's arrogance, and Sloan's obsession with perfection. But silence had been twisted into weakness. That morning, silence ended. I picked up the pen. The ink flowed smooth as I signed my name. Nora Bennett. Not decorative, not erased, not invisible. My hand pressed firm against the paper, the signature more than consent. It was declaration. The red seal struck again. Thud. Ruth slid the page into the envelope, her eyes sharp. We act quiet. The law speaks loud. I nodded once. Do it clean. Caleb typed furiously, forwarding attachments, confirming timestamps. His eyes flicked to the corner of his screen. Sent. Bellevue Bank received. Lake Union CPA confirmed delivery. San Mateo firm acknowledged receipt. Timestamp, 9:03 a.m. Ruth leaned back, folding her hands together. By tonight they will know. The trust is frozen. They cannot touch a cent. I stood, straightening my coat. By tonight they will think they cut me off, but they will learn the truth with dessert. The office fell silent for a beat, the weight of what had been set in motion pressing into the room. The only sound was the low hum of Caleb's laptop cooling fan, steady, mechanical. I tucked the envelope under my arm, the cream paper cool against my hand. That envelope was more than evidence. It was the fulcrum on which their comfort would tip into collapse. My steps were steady as I walked out of Ruth's office. The marble floors reflected the outline of my figure, no longer shadow, but something solid. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing the moment. Inside the steel box, I allowed myself one single breath of release. Not joy, not triumph, just certainty. Outside, the city bustled unaware. To them, it was another gray Seattle morning. To me, it was the morning my voice returned in ink, seal, and authority. And at exactly 9:03 a.m., the freeze notice was real. A line was drawn. Hours later, at the Queen Anne dinner table, the envelope sat beside the pumpkin pie. Its weight was invisible, but the silence it carried was undeniable. The morning after Thanksgiving, Seattle felt sharper. The air had an edge that matched my resolve. I left the house before sunrise and drove toward University Village, the open-air mall where appearances are curated like window displays. I ordered a black coffee, stood beneath a heat lamp, and watched the city wake. The freeze had gone into effect at 9:03 a.m. the day before. Now the consequences would step into the light. I did not need to hunt for proof. Proof would present itself. I saw them before they saw me. Sloan moved like a hostess entering her own segment on morning television. Vivian flanked her in a camel coat. A soft scarf fell perfectly along her lapels. Their steps were synchronized, their heads tilted at the same angle, every gesture rehearsed. They walked into a boutique with warm lighting and shelves of folded cashmere. I stayed on the sidewalk, close enough to observe, far enough to remain a shadow. Through the glass, a clerk approached with a smile. Vivian selected a pale blanket and a pair of gloves. Sloan nodded approval, chin lifted. The clerk rang them up. Vivian handed over her card with a confident flick. The register chirped once, then twice. The clerk's smile faltered. She tried again. She wiped the strip. She turned to the small printer as it stuttered and spat a narrow slip. The word at the top was unmistakable. Capital letters, centered, pitiless. Temporary hold. I could not hear the conversation. I did not need to. Vivian's mouth thinned. Her hand hovered in the air, suspended between elegance and fury. The clerk apologized. The politeness was bright enough to sting. Sloane leaned over the counter, voice low. The clerk shook her head, then gestured to the phone number listed on the receipt. Vivian placed both gloves on the counter as if returning evidence, then reached for her purse with surgical care. She would not give the room a scene. She would give it a lesson. She said it slowly, enunciating each word so the clerk and my daughter and anyone listening would understand. A family brand needs clean lines. The clerk nodded. The words meant nothing to her, but they meant everything to Vivian. Clean lines meant no questions, no wrinkles, no mothers at the end of tables, no cracks in the photograph. Vivian turned on her heel and walked out. Sloane followed 2 steps behind, already composing something on her phone, thumbs rapid and controlled. Outside, she paused near the fountain and dialed. I recognized the tightness in her shoulders. She was calling Colin. I drifted closer, coffee in hand, posture casual. Sloane hit speaker. A man answered with the thin bravado of someone who had not slept. Before Colin could posture, another voice cut through the line, a foreman, clipped and direct. Deposit stalled. We stop. The words landed like a hammer. No legal jargon, no soft edges. Work at Jackson Hole was done until money moved. The wind carried the sentence across the plaza. Even the fountain sounded quieter. Sloane stabbed the speaker button off and hissed into the phone. Handle optics. Say vendor delay. Do not use the word freeze. She listened. Her jaw worked. Then she ended the call without goodbye. Vivian stepped closer. Her expression returned to a perfect stillness. Walk. Do not linger. Never give onlookers a still frame they can study. They moved down the corridor. I followed at a distance. Inside a home store, a young couple argued over curtain rods. A toddler laughed at a display of stuffed bears. Normal life continued, indifferent. I did not chase my daughter. I did not announce myself. I observed the spiral tighten. My phone buzzed. Caleb's name lit the screen. He had sent me a photo, the boutique receipt with temporary hold centered in stark type, timestamp 9:27 a.m. A second message followed, his summary concise. Jackson Hole site paused, foreman confirmed by phone, bank notices acknowledged. I replied with 2 words, proceed clean. He answered with 1, always. At the far end of the plaza, Sloane found a bench near a planter of ornamental grasses. She set her phone on her knee and opened the camera facing herself. She adjusted her hair. She lifted her chin by a degree. I watched the transformation a brand manager performs before addressing a lens. Then she opened Instagram. For a moment, her thumb hovered. Then she typed a sentence that had the ring of a corporate motto and the hollowness of a deflection. Growth requires hard choices. She added a neutral background. She tapped post. Within seconds, comments began to stack beneath her story. The questions rose like smoke. Where's Grandma? Is she okay? Why was she at the end of the table? Why did you move her seat? People were not asking for a press release. They were asking for truth. Sloane scrolled. The muscles at her jaw tightened again. Vivian leaned over her shoulder and whispered, I did not need the words. I knew the doctrine. Ignore, overwhelm, redirect, never answer the question you do not like. Colin called again. Sloane rejected it. Then her phone rang a 3rd time and she answered. His voice shredded the calm. He wanted a fix. He wanted a workaround. He wanted the old days when money moved without friction. I heard the bark of his panic through the speaker before she cut it. Her response was a blade. Optics first, then money. Always in that order. Vivian nodded once, as if granting a pass on a well-constructed sentence. I took a sip of coffee. It had gone cold. The morning had done what it needed to do. The freeze had not humiliated them. It had exposed them. For people who live by image, exposure is the only language they cannot control. I could have approached, I could have offered a seat, I could have asked Sloane if she wanted breakfast. That part of me still existed. It simply was not in charge. The part in charge was the steward of a legacy that did not belong to a curated photograph. My phone buzzed again. A text from Lily appeared, a screenshot of Sloane's story with a single question mark. I replied carefully. "Call me after school." She answered with a heart, then another text, just 2 words. "I'm here." I slipped the phone back into my coat. The plaza lights switched off as the sun finally cleared the low clouds. The day looked brighter. The ground felt firm. Sloane stood and smoothed her coat. Vivian resumed her glide. They turned left toward the parking structure. I let them go. I did not follow them into darkness. I followed the light toward the bookstore. In the window, a stack of blank journals sat next to a pen display. I stepped inside and bought one. The cashier wrapped it in thin paper and slid it into a small bag. "Gift receipt," she said. I shook my head. "No, this one is staying with me." On my way back to the car, I passed the boutique again. The clerk was folding the returned blanket with slow care, as if smoothing the memory out of the fabric. She glanced up. Our eyes met. I nodded once. She did not know me. She did not need to. The system had worked the way systems should work when people obey rules. It had said no without raising its voice. When I reached the end of the row, I turned and took one last look at the plaza. The fountain kept its rhythm. Traffic murmured along NE 45th Street. A dog barked somewhere near the cafe. I placed the journal on the passenger seat, buckled my belt, and started the engine. The day had cracked the picture. By nightfall, the truth would show through the lines. I reached Eugene before the low clouds lifted. Bennett and Sons. Millworks woke in fits of sound. A compressor kicked. A forklift chirped. The table saw sang itself up to speed. I walked the catwalk to the floor. Men in ear protection nodded. They did not stare. They knew me. Outside, the Willamette Valley air tasted metallic. Gulls wheeled above corrugated roofs. A whistle from the kiln timed the shift like a metronome. I passed the break room bulletin board with safety cards and pay stubs, the ordinary paper of a life built by hands, not slogans and grit. I pressed the red stop bar on the saw. The blade wound down with a long metallic sigh. Silence settled like authority. Caleb came from the office with a clipboard. "They're on the way." Headlights swept the wall and died. A white SUV stopped by the loading bay. Sloane stepped out in a city coat and clean heels, fabric that hated dust. No Vivian, no entourage. She scanned stacked maple and chalked cut lists. She kept her smile small. "Time," she said. "We need time." "You had time," I said. "You spent it." She inhaled like she was walking on stage. "The narrative is volatile. I can stabilize it if you let me. We keep the brand clean. We call this a seasonal audit. We move the Aspen piece off the books. We reframe the scholarship campaign. Give me room to work." "Photos can be clean. Ledgers can't." She blinked, then pressed on. "The hold makes us look reckless. Vendors flinch. The board panics. The press starts guessing. Unfreeze. I will fix the rest." Caleb's voice stayed even. Transfers moved from the vocational fund in Lane County to S.R. Jackson Alpine LLC. Memo lines dressed as administration. Destination was a chalet. "Temporary liquidity," she said. "Collateralized by assets you control." "Collateralized by silence I never signed," I said. She raised her phone to show a draft post. "People need assurance, not scandal. You can be the matriarch who holds the house. That reads well. Or the widow who burned her table. That kills the brand." "This is not a table you style," I said. "This is a floor you stand on." Sawdust hung in the light like slow snow. It kissed my sleeves. It settled on Caleb's clipboard. It clung to every boot around us. It did not touch Sloane. Her heels cut 2 hard lines across the concrete, clean as a blade. "Give me 48 hours," she said. "I'll craft the message. Colin will move funds. Vivian will meet the private banker. We present a sequence and lower the temperature." "You will present numbers," I said. "Verified. A restitution schedule with dates and amounts. No relabeling theft as liquidity." Her jaw set. "You humiliated me at dinner." "I delivered a document," I said. "You delivered the misuse." A nail gun popped in the far bay. Airlines hissed. The mill went on with its day. She jerked her chin toward the office. "Inside." "Here," I said. I tapped speaker on my phone. "Bellevue Private Banking, fiduciary desk." A woman answered crisp. I gave my name, co-trustee status, and the verification phrase Malcolm chose. She confirmed. "The trust accounts remain on temporary administrative hold under your authority as co-trustee pursuant to the springing power clause. No disbursements will be permitted without dual approval pending forensic review." "Please repeat that on speaker," I said. She did. Her words carried farther than any statement Sloan could draft. I thanked her and ended the call. Sloan held her chin at parade rest. "You made your point. You also painted a target." "You painted the money first," I said. "You used it like makeup." Caleb offered a manila folder. Wireproofs, vendor emails, Plano invoices tied to Vivian's shell. Ruth's team marked each exhibit. Sloan did not touch it. "We do not air family business on a factory floor." "We fix it where it broke," I said. "The vocational fund fed this place. You bled it." She stepped closer. Perfume met sap and lost. "I built a public face that protected you." "You built a mask that started eating you," I said. "Now it wants the house." Her laugh cracked. "You want an apology? I will script 3. You want a bow? I can choreograph that. But if the line on me is that I stole from kids, the brand dies. Then the company dies. Your legacy with it." "The company breathes through work," I said. "Your brand floats on air." She put both hands in her coat pockets. 48 hours. I will bring a plan with teeth. Bring a plan with numbers. Numbers and optics, she said. Numbers, I repeated. Her phone buzzed. "Colin is at the Jackson Hole site. The foreman wants a hard answer today." Caleb did not look up. "The answer is what it was at 9:03 yesterday." She gave him a thin smile. "You talk like her." "I do not have to teach him to see," I said. The saw ticked as the blade cooled. A young apprentice pushed a cart past, eyes down, careful not to intrude. Sloan watched him, then met my eyes. "You are choosing a warehouse over your daughter." "I am choosing the truth over a lie." She swallowed. The pride in her throat was hard. "If I bring a restitution schedule, you lift the hold." "I initiate restructure," I said. "The court reviews. The audit closes when it closes. You will not buy absolution with spin." She nodded once, sealing something private. "Then we both have work." I pressed the start button. The saw climbed to a bright, unforgiving whine. I pointed to the dust moving through light. "This place makes things that last. Hold yourself to that." She turned for the door. Sawdust split around her heels, refusing to touch. Caleb watched her go. 48? 48, I said. "Bring a real plan." I reached the accounting office on Lake Union before the wind picked up across the water. The building sat over pilings. Glass reflected a gray sky. Gulls skimmed low. Inside, the air held the clean bite of toner and fresh paper. No art on the walls, just framed compliance notices and a clock that clicked louder than it needed to. I wanted precision. This room promised it. Caleb met me at the door with a stack of binders and a legal pad. His sleeves were rolled, his eyes were clear. Ruth was already in the conference room, tablet open, glasses low on her nose like a judge who does not repeat herself. Caleb set the first binder on the table and opened to a bank statement. He uncapped a yellow highlighter and dragged a straight line across a date column. "Start here," he said. 18 months ago, a series of transfers from the Cascadia Vocational Fund, Lane County training grants, tool stipends, apprentice stipends, regular outflows, then a new pattern, larger amounts, labeled administrative, cut on Fridays, posted Mondays. He flipped the page and made a clean mark through a memo line. Temporary liquidity, he read. He clicked his pen, drew an arrow to the right, circled an account name. Destination entity, S.R. Jackson Alpine LLC, registered in Wyoming, mailing address in Jackson. Beneficiary account tied to a title company, not to a school or a vendor in Oregon. I looked him in the eye. Amounts: $350,000 in Q1, $500 in Q3. Then a cluster of smaller draws designed to hide in normal traffic. Total to date, $2.8 million from the vocational fund stream, moved off mission. Ruth did not glance up. She scrolled, then stopped. Her thumb tapped the screen once. Section 8.3 is our spine, she said. Breach of purpose triggers authority to freeze. Initiate a forensic. Petition for restructure or dissolution after review. This is not discretionary. It is mandatory when misuse is verified. Caleb turned to a clean sheet on the legal pad and sketched a simple flow. Left box, Cascadia Vocational Fund. Arrow to a middle box, internal trust subaccount used as a pass-through. Arrow to right box, S.R. Jackson Alpine LLC. Small arrow to a final box, title service in Jackson Hole. He wrote numbers under each arrow, notations for dates, bank identifiers redacted, last 4 digits consistent across the chain. He kept his lines straight, his pen strokes quiet. The diagram made the crime look like a traffic map. I pointed to the center box. Who authorized use of the pass-through? Collins submitted the internal transfer requests, Caleb said. His notes cite temporary liquidity for a board retreat property, later reclassified as wellness development. No motion in the minutes, no vote, no trustee consent. Ruth looked up now, voice even. Consent is not implied by silence when the trust language requires written approval. Silence cannot override the instrument. Caleb laid out vendor emails like tiles. Apprenticeship coordinators in Springfield and Creswell had asked about delayed reimbursements for boots and safety glasses. A tool stipend batch had been short. A diesel bill for the training van had been deferred. Dates lined up with the transfers. Every missing voucher mapped to a movement of funds. He highlighted 3 lines, the bright yellow slashed through the excuses. I kept my tone flat. Audit everything. Caleb nodded once and opened his laptop. He mirrored the screen to the wall display. A dashboard appeared. Not fancy, just rows and columns, enough to show any eye what mattered. He clicked a tab marked Trail, drilled into transaction metadata, showed a consistent user ID on the requests, showed timestamps that landed after hours, showed memo fields edited minutes after bank close. He clicked again and opened the entity record for S.R. Jackson Alpine LLC. Articles of organization, a manager of record with a generic address, a registered agent service, nothing in Oregon, nothing tied to training. Ruth marked the binder with green tabs. She did not waste motions. We begin a formal forensic today, independent verification, custody of records preserved, interviews documented. We will notify Bellevue Private Banking that audits have commenced. They will extend the administrative hold until completion. We will notify the Vocational Fund Board. We will notify the court that the trust is under review for restructure due to breach. Caleb pulled a fresh folder from his stack and slid it to me. Exhibits A through K bank statements, internal transfer requests, memo histories, vendor emails, the Jackson escrow pre-approval, the calendar entries tied to the board retreat at altitude. We have screenshots and source files with hash checksums. Chain of custody starts here. I opened to Exhibit C, the first transfer labeled administrative. The number looked modest at a glance. Then I saw the cadence and understood the intent. Death by 1,000 cuts is still death. I closed the folder and looked at Ruth. Draft the notices, I said. Send them now. She already had. She turned the tablet toward me. 3 emails sat in the outbox, each with the same spine. Forensic audit initiated. Trust under administrative hold. Preservation and production of records required. She hit send. The tablet hummed. Caleb clicked on a second tab labeled Impact. Charts appeared, not designed for drama, designed for truth. The vocational fund's monthly tool voucher rate dipped below baseline the same week the first transfer hit Jackson. Stipends for apprentices had been split into partial disbursements. Delays appeared as rolling shortages in the program's quarterly report. He did not say shame, he showed it. I felt my jaw tighten, not with grief, with discipline. Emotion can be used against you. Evidence cannot. Flag every delay that touched a student, I said. Document names and dates. We will make them whole first. Caleb wrote it down. Block letters, underlined once. Ruth spoke without looking up. The instrument's purpose controls the flow. When funds designated for training are diverted, the breach is not technical. It is moral. Section 8.3 gives us tools. We will use the hard ones. The door opened softly. A junior associate slipped in with a portable scanner and a box of labeled sleeves. She did not speak. She set the scanner on the credenza and began feeding documents. The machine made a precise tone at each pass, the rhythm steady, the discipline audible. Caleb returned to the wall display and enlarged a single-line item. He highlighted the date, then the memo, then the destination account. The yellow stripe cut through the page like a warning flare. This is the pivot, he said. After this, the cadence accelerates. I stood and walked to the glass wall that looked over the lake. Boats knocked lightly against their lines. The water kept its own counsel. I turned back to the table. We will not argue about intentions, I said. We will show actions. We will make corrections with numbers and signatures, not apologies shaped like press releases. Ruth closed her tablet cover with a clean click. I will file notice with the court. The language will be firm. Breach, freeze, forensic, restructure petition pending audit closure. She slid a single-page checklist across to Caleb. Start interviews, preserve devices, no deletion, no obfuscation. He nodded and began typing. His first email carried a clear subject line, Forensic Audit Initiated. He attached the preservation notice. He CC'd counsel and the bank. He embedded a read receipt. He clicked send. The subject line filled the screen as the projector auto-focused. The words were plain. The meaning was not. The trail had been drawn in ink. Now the review would carve it in stone. At 3 o'clock, the sitting room looked staged. The tray sat centered on the table. 2 cups equidistant, lemon slices fanned in a half moon, sugar cubes stacked like dice. Vivian adjusted the butter knife so the handle faced inward. She turned it a 1/4 inch to align with the rim. She wanted angles to obey. She had spent a lifetime sanding edges off truth. Sloane entered without knocking. The coat, controlled breath, eyes reading the room. She sat opposite me. Vivian poured Darjeeling with laboratory precision. No spill, no steam wasted. The air smelled of citrus and polish. No scent of wood was allowed. Vivian's voice landed first. Never show a crack. She did not look at me. She looked at Sloane. Chin level, shoulders back. Let the camera see restraint. This is not about events. This is about frames. Sloane nodded once. I know the frames. Vivian set a lemon at 12 o'clock on each saucer. People forgive mistakes when they look like upgrades. We announce modernization of governance. We avoid any word that sounds like court. Sloane's face reflected in the tall mirror behind me. The mouth held too still. She reached for her cup and paused as Vivian moved the knife again, handle inward, blade aligned. Sloane set it softly, without spin. We hid them, with money. She kept her eyes on me. Vivian did not flinch. We invested in continuity. Language matters. A retreat property is not a scandal. It is strategy. I took a photo from my bag and set it on the tray beside the sugar. 4 apprentices stood in second-hand boots at the Eugene mill, sawdust on their sleeves, pride under the dirt. The tea steamed between us like a thin curtain. Vivian glanced at the picture as if it were a bill. Do not center the past, she said. Center the narrative. We say seasonal audit. We say vendor delay. We offer a line about resilience. Sloane's reflection leaned forward in the mirror. The hold is real, she said. Vendors are talking. Jackson is frozen. The boutique incident ricocheted through staff chats. Vivian tapped the table with one red nail. Then move faster than the whisper. Announce a board listening tour. Share a note about mentorship. Drown the noise in activity. I lifted my cup and took a measured sip. The bitterness steadied me. Sloane watched the motion, calculating. If I brief a journalist I trust, she said, we can frame this as generational recalibration. You remain the matriarch. I steward modernization. We bury words like misuse. Vivian added sugar and stirred without clinking. Never show a crack, she repeated. Cracks invite stories we do not write. I turned the photo so it faced them. The boys' names were written on the back in block letters. The story exists, I said. It smells like pine and diesel. It does not care about your frames. Sloane set her saucer down. Optics will decide whether any of them have jobs next year. If confidence collapses, donors run, customers pause, layoffs follow, we can avoid that if we stop bleeding perception. Vivian nodded. We host a luncheon. We stage a walkthrough at the mill. We put hard hats on the board. We change the focus. I set my cup on the tray. Focus on repayment, I said. Focus on the vocational fund you emptied to decorate a mountain. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Allegations. Numbers, I said. Sloane inhaled, held it, exhaled through her nose. We cannot litigate at tea. We can align. You want restitution. I can deliver a schedule. You want governance. I can propose dual signatures. You want respect. I can upgrade the seat you occupy in the release. Vivian smiled, a small reward for fluent spin. Respect is a photograph that survives scrutiny. I looked at the mirror. Enough of etiquette masquerading as ethics. Respect, I said, is a ledger that survives audit. Sloane crossed her arms, then uncrossed them. We will mend this if we stay on one message, she said. You can be firm without wounding the house. The house rotted where you polished it, I said. Vivian shifted the butter knife again, as if the angle would save the china. You are emotional. That is dangerous. I am specific, I said. Sloane leaned in. Give me language I can use. Strong, not terminal. I let the hallway clock mark 3 seconds. Commit to full restitution with dates, accept a forensic review with public summary, sign a waiver of claims against my estate, say it in that order, then stand still. Vivian's lip curled. We never stand still. Stillness is surrender. Stillness is clarity, I said. Motion becomes fog when it hides. Sloane looked at the photo again. Her mouth tightened. The mirror magnified it. If I bring what you want, you will lower the temperature. The law lowers it, I said. I will not raise it. Vivian placed her spoon across her saucer. Then it is decided. We draft, we announce, we move. I checked the time. My phone lit with a new message. The alert tone cut through the tidy room like a small hammer. Ding. Subject line in bold. Subpoena draft. Sender. Ruth Delgado. Recipient. Counsel in Plano. The first line read, Request for production. Entity records for the consulting company tied to Vivian's address. Preservation notice effective immediately. Delivery by close of business. CC to me. The subject mirrored on my watch. Ruth's language left no air for spin. I set the phone face down. The china hummed as the table took the vibration. Sloane heard the tone but did not ask. Vivian lifted her cup with 2 fingers and took a cool sip. The tray remained symmetrical. The knife faced inward. The mirror kept our faces honest. The room held its breath. I lifted the photo, slid it to my side of the table, and stood. 48 hours, I said. Bring a real plan back. And Ruth opened the Zoom room 2 minutes early. Punctuality is a kind of pressure. I joined. Caleb joined. A paralegal named Mina shared her screen. On the other side sat a Plano investigator retained by Ruth's firm. His camera framed a beige conference room and a stack of state filings. Ruth's voice was clipped. She had the cadence of someone who knows where the road ends. We are tracing consulting invoices issued from a shell in Plano. We will confirm beneficial ownership and delivery of services. Begin. Mina pulled up a ledger grid. She slid a highlighter box over 3 recurring payees. Vendor, Magnolia Meridian Consulting LLC, remit to Plano, Texas, suite number leads to a registered agent mailbox. She enlarged the invoice headers. Scope lines vague, strategic alignment, governance modernization, no deliverables attached. The investigator flipped to a Secretary of State page. File date 18 months back. Registered agent service in a retail plaza off the President George Bush Turnpike. Manager of record, blank. Mailing address alternate. Highland Park, Dallas. He tapped his printout. Alternate address matches a townhome owned by Vivian Lane. Caleb muted, then unmuted. He chose plain words. We have bank-to-vendor wires from the vocational fund stream. Memo lines. Administrative. Later amended. Temporary liquidity. Ruth kept her eyes on the screen. Cross the billing IP with consumer records. Mina opened an email header trace. 2 invoice PDFs originated from a residential IP registered to a provider in Dallas. Subnet geolocates within 3 blocks of Vivian's townhome. Timestamps hit afternoon Central Time. Metadata shows Adobe license assigned to V Lane. Ruth nodded once. The approval was microscopic, but real. Next, delivery. The investigator held up a photo of the agent's suite, a wall of identical mail slots. No physical office, no staff, forwarding only. I requested any physical copies under public records, nothing on file. Ruth addressed me without softening. We have invoices to a mailbox, wires to a title company, and an alternate address that is Vivian's home. Produce order is ready. Send it, I said. Caleb added 2 more links to chat. Tool stipend reimbursements missed the same week's payments hit Magnolia Meridian or Jackson Escrow. Apprentices in Creswell and Springfield documented delays. Names redacted for privacy. Mina pulled up a simple map. Oregon on the left, arrows pointing south, then east, final dot blinking over Dallas. She clicked again. A second path lit toward Jackson Hole. Ruth's tone hardened. We will issue a preservation notice and subpoena Deuces Techum, entity records, ledgers, bank statements, IP logs, emails, work product. We will serve the registered agent and the Highland Park address. In plain language, I said, we cut the story off at the roots. Ruth allowed herself one small breath. Exactly. Caleb's fingers moved. Orders appeared on e-sign. I reviewed, signed. Ruth countersigned. Mina printed hard copies, slid them into a branded envelope, then called a same-day courier in Dallas. The camera caught the handoff at the Plano Plaza. The courier sealed the pouch with tamper tape and headed south on the tollway. Ruth looked straight into her lens. When she receives it, she will call. Stay on. We watched the courier's tracking tile crawl across a city I have known only through return addresses. The Highland Park pin blinked. The courier's status changed to arriving. The Zoom room fell quiet, except for the faint scratch of Mina's pen. A minute later, a Ring camera still appeared in the courier app. Vivian stood in a slate robe, no makeup, hair pulled back, the cool face of a woman surprised in her own frame. She took the envelope, signed with a quick stroke, shut the door with the grace she keeps for cameras. My phone lit. Private a number, Dallas area code. Ruth lifted a hand. She answered on speaker. Vivian did not waste niceties. You sent a subpoena to my home. That is not how discretion works. Ruth's tone did not bend. You accepted service. Preservation is now in effect. Do not delete. Produce by close of business per the schedule. Vivian exhaled. The sound was almost elegant. In my world, one bad photo kills a magazine. You are splashing ink on the brand's face. In my world, Ruth said, one bad ledger kills a trust. Vivian shifted to strategy. These invoices reflect senior counsel, off-calendar briefings, optics underwriting. This is not grift. This is protection. Deliver the work product, Ruth said. Meeting notes, drafts, research, outputs that justify consideration, or deliver restitution. Vivian's edge sharpened. You women think the audience cares about footnotes. Audiences care about angles. I spoke for the first time. I care about the apprentices who did not get boots because your angles needed a chalet. Silence, then a taut smile in her voice. I could hear it without seeing it. "Nora, you mistake theater for theft. We can fix theater." "You can fix theft with a cashier's check," I said. Ruth ended the call cleanly. "Everything after that belongs to the record." She clicked into the Dallas court portal and docketed notice of service. The Zoom room returned to the hum of air vents and laptop fans. 10 minutes later, Caleb's phone buzzed. He read the text and looked at me. Bank risk flagged the Magnolia Meridian flows. Compliance upgraded Vivian's card status from review to lock after service hit the system. "Where?" I asked. "Highland Park Village Boutique," he said. "She tried to split a payment. The terminal routed to manual. The lock engaged. Staff asked for another card." Ruth held up a hand. Mina already had it. The boutique's floor manager, a former classmate of Mina's, had sent a brief note. No gossip, just a courtesy heads-up that a lockout had occurred at the counter. Attached was a still from the store's overhead camera. Policy allowed footage when fraud was suspected. Vivian stood at the register. The clerk offered the phone number on the slip. Vivian's face altered by a few degrees. The look of someone who understands that control has left the room. I did not gloat. I do not have time for sugar highs. I held the image in my mind like a diagnostic scan. No celebration, just confirmation that the system had touched skin. Ruth tapped her pen twice. "Next moves. We will notice the Vocational Fund Board. We will brief Bellevue. We will schedule interviews. Nora, you will not engage publicly. Silence keeps value." "Agreed," I said. "Let her chase cameras. We will chase numbers." Caleb outlined tasks, hash inventories, device images, custody logs. He keeps order with pens and tape. It is a kind of mercy in chaos. Mina prepared a second courier pouch, this one to the registered agent. Duplicate service builds fences around denial. Ruth looked back at me. "You asked for a spine. Section 8.3 provides it. We will not bend." "Then we keep walking," I said. "If she brings proof, we read it. If she brings heat, we ignore it. If she brings a check, we cash it and keep the audit." Ruth nodded once. "Good." I closed my notebook. The leather cover felt solid under my hand. The window over Lake Union reflected a narrow band of sun breaking through cloud. Not warmth, clarity. I signed off. Caleb stayed to coordinate. Ruth remained in the frame, already drafting the next notice. My phone pinged again. A bank alert mirrored what Caleb had said. Card status, locked, merchant, Highland Park Village. I pictured the boutique's soft lighting and scented air, the curated silence that sells the idea of flawlessness. The still frame of Vivian's face hovered in my mind. The moment a mask learns it has edges, I did not save the image. I did not need to. The lesson was already written where it mattered. A ledger does not care about a lens, a court does not care about a caption, and a trust, once held, speaks louder than any magazine cover. Sloane's open kitchen was staged for control. Concrete counters, brass pulls. The pumpkin chiffon rested on a slate trivet, cinnamon in the air. I arrived with a leather folio and nothing that could be mistaken for sentiment. Lily hovered with plates. Colin uncorked a bottle. Vivian arranged napkins to perfect corners. Sloane greeted me with a smile polished for interviews. "Dessert first, then a reset," she said, setting forks with the precision of a floor plan. "We can bring the temperature down." She gestured toward the pie. I laid the folio on the island and unzipped it. The sound cut through the room. 3 stacks slid free onto the marble. First, bank statements tracing transfers from the Cascadia Vocational Fund into an internal pass-through. Second, orders to SR Jackson Alpine LLC tied to the Jackson Hole Chalet. Third, Magnolia Meridian invoices from Plano. Vague consulting for governance modernization without deliverables. On top, a 1-page summary in bold type. Terminate, audit, rest it. Sloane laughed. "To what end?" She tilted her head. "Is this about punishment or peace?" "To call theft by its name," I said. Lily's spoon grazed a plate. The cling rang once. She stepped back from the pie and waited. Colin took the statements and scanned for totals like a man checking weather after he feels rain. These are liquidity measures, he said. Seasonal adjustments, retreat assets, cash management. The invoices reflect senior counsel. Nothing here is criminal. Deliverables, I asked. Where are they, and when were they delivered? Vivian drew a stack toward her with 2 fingers, careful not to disturb alignment. Family matters should not become theater, she said. In my world, one keeps the frame tight. Announce a governance refresh. Hold a luncheon. Avoid language that invites court. A matriarch keeps boots on apprentices, I said. You pulled their fun to stage a mountain and a mailbox. Sloane lifted the summary and read, face smooth until the last word. Waiver, she said, testing it. You want me to surrender future claims. You want control without conversation. I want misused money back into the vocational stream, a forensic audit with public findings, and an end to lawsuits designed to drag this house through mud, I said. The waiver prevents that orbit. She set the page down and braced her hands on the island. Optics govern confidence. If you keep the hold, vendors whisper, donors freeze, customers hesitate. We can solve this quietly. Lift the hold, we meet you in the middle. Quietest. The hold remains until the audit closes, I said. Section 8.3 dictates process, not my mood. Lily nudged a statement so the dates showed. Her mouth tightened when she recognized a weak tuition, almost bounced. Colin changed tone. We will pledge the chalet, unwind over 6 quarters, collateral plus interest, a press note about modernization. Everyone keeps face. Restitution is not choreography, I said. Cash returned to the vocational account now. Escrow for the balance, then a statement that names what happened. Vivian exhaled like a measured sigh. You will not win hearts with ledgers. I will not lose the trust with poses, I said. Sloane shifted the Plano invoices under the bank pages. A burial. I will not sign a waiver while accounts are frozen, she said. You are holding a house hostage. The house was held the moment you diverted funds, I said. This unlocks when numbers move home. She smiled. Sugar over steel. Then you have declared war. I filed paperwork, I said. You declared strategy and called it virtue. The pie waited between us, steam fading. Lily reached for the knife, then set it down. Mom, she said quietly, read the dates. Sloane did not look down. I tapped the summary. 4 conditions. Terminate discretionary authority that enabled the transfers. Audit every stream touched. Restitution in verified cash, not promises. Waiver of claims against my estate and the trust. Meet them, and this stays in rooms with doors. Refuse, and doors open to a courtroom. Colin poured wine he did not drink. The court of public opinion moves faster than superior court, he said. We can shape the narrative. I do not post, I said. I file. Banks obey before strangers opine. Vivian placed a napkin ring on its side, a tiny polished shield. You can still be remembered as gracious, she said. You could be the woman who chose porch light mercy, not fire. I prefer electricity that pays the shop's bill, I said. Mercy without repair is a costume. Sloane examined the typography as if kerning might hide a path. If I sign, what do I get? You get to rebuild without a chase behind you, I said. You get sleep that does not require spin. She laughed once, brittle. You underestimate appetite. I outlast storms. I stopped underwriting storms, I said. Lily slid a dessert plate toward me, a quiet declaration. Vivian saw the motion, her mouth sharpened. You are training her to betray blood, she said. I am training her to read, I said, and to count. The clock marked a steady second. City noise rose under the windows. The chiffon cooled past perfect. Sloane studied the stacks. The ink did not blink. She folded the summary, unfolded it, smoothed the crease with her thumb. To what end? She asked, not smiling now. To stop the misuse and fund the work, I said. Nothing clever, just repair. She nodded, slow. You will have an answer in 48 hours. Bring a real plan, I said. She portioned herself a thin slice. The spoon tapped porcelain. Cling. She did not eat. Colin capped the bottle. Vivian straightened the forks by feel. I slipped the folio closed. The summary stayed on the island, ink black against white stone. The frame narrowed in my mind until only one word filled it. The word that makes contests over image irrelevant. The word that quiets future ambush. The kitchen lights hummed softly. Waiver. The elevators opened onto the 22nd floor. Polished stone, recessed lighting, no music. Ruth's office stretched across a corner with glass walls that looked down on downtown Seattle. A long conference table dominated the room, whiteboard on one side, clock above it. Caleb had written in thick black marker, 30 days. Beneath it, he drew 3 boxes with arrows: restitution, waiver, litigation. Sloan walked in with Colin trailing behind, his tie pulled too tight. Vivian stayed at home. Her absence was strategy, not surrender. Ruth sat at the head of the table, her files already organized in parallel stacks. I took the chair opposite Sloan. My folio lay flat in front of me, no props, no theater. Ruth began without ceremony. 3 options. Option 1, 30 days to return all misused funds to the vocational account with interest. Option 2, sign waiver of all claims against Mrs. Bennett and the trust. Accept restructuring under her authority. Option 3, decline both and face litigation in King County Superior Court under elder financial exploitation and fraud. Colin swallowed. He glanced at the whiteboard. The clock ticked above the 30-day countdown. His fingers twisted at his pen, clicking without rhythm. Sloan kept her eyes on me, not Ruth. She wore her PR smile like armor. "You made the holidays ugly," she said. I did not look away. "I took out the trash." The words landed like a hammer. Caleb capped his marker, letting the silence harden. Sloan turned to Ruth. "We are not criminals. We are managers caught in transition." Ruth's tone stayed razor sharp. "The numbers are not in transition. They are in violation. The state does not weigh intentions. It weighs ledgers." Colin leaned forward, desperate to slow the tide. "We can negotiate terms, stagger repayment, collateralize the chalet." I cut him off. "Collateral was never yours to pledge. Restitution is not a favor, it is obligation." Sloan shifted tactics. "If you force litigation, optics will drown us all. Investors, donors, partners, they will see fracture. You want to save apprentices, but you will leave them jobless if the house collapses." Ruth slid one page across the table. "The house is already bleeding. Your signature moved the knife. The question is whether you pull it out or twist it further." Colin picked up the paper, skimmed, and dropped it as if it burned. 30 days is impossible." Caleb leaned in. 30 days is generous. Wire traces show you diverted $2.8 million over 18 months. That is less than what you spent on 3 board retreats. Return it." Sloane's smile cracked. Her eyes flickered toward the glass wall, then back. "What if we choose none of your options?" Ruth folded her hands. "Then discovery begins. Subpoenas for devices, depositions under oath, forensic audit entered into public record. Headlines will not read board retreat. They will read elder exploitation." The clock ticked. I let the sound fill the gap. "Choose quickly," I said. "Noise will not change numbers." Sloane's jaw tightened. She looked at Colin, his shoulders hunched, eyes darting. He muttered, "We can't outlast this." Her hand gripped his wrist, nails digging into his sleeve. "We are not surrendering to spectacle." I leaned forward, voice steady. "This is not spectacle. This is accountability." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Ruth stood, gathered her folders, and snapped them shut. "You have 30 days. At day 31, we file." Caleb erased the board and rewrote 29 days in silent warning. Sloan rose from her chair, face controlled but pale. "You think you have won," she said. "No," I answered. "I think the truth has." She left without another word. Colin followed, shoulders sagging under weight he could no longer carry. The door clicked shut behind them. Ruth turned to me. "They will test the clock. They will drag their feet." "They can drag," I said. "The hold is extended." Caleb tapped his laptop, projecting the screen. An email confirmation filled the wall in black text. "Administrative hold extended. effective immediately. Bellevue Private Banking. The subject line glowed like a verdict. The countdown had begun, and this time the clock belonged to me. The wind at Cary Park cut sharp across the ridge. The view of the Space Needle sat against Mount Rainier, half-veiled in cloud. Tourists laughed at the skyline, cameras flashing, but Lily and I stood apart on the stone wall. Her shoulders hunched inside her jacket, arms folded, eyes fixed on the city below, as if it might swallow her whole. She broke the silence first. "Grandma, I need to tell you something." Her voice carried both defiance and shame. I waited. Sometimes words grow heavier when they meet quiet. My mom made me sign something last spring, a scholarship acknowledgement letter. She said it was for optics, that it would help the family foundation look active. But there was no scholarship, it was just staged. She told me it was harmless. I signed. I didn't even ask questions. Now I can't stop thinking about it. Her breath quickened. Her cheeks flushed. I've been ashamed ever since. I felt complicit. And I hate that I did it because she told me to. I reached into my bag and pulled out a pen. Black lacquer, brass clip, worn smooth from years in my hand. I had given it to Lily when she graduated middle school, a symbol that her words would carry weight if she chose. I held it out. She didn't take it immediately. Tears stood in her eyes. "I don't deserve this anymore." She placed the pen back in my palm. "I'll earn it, on my own terms." The weight of that small gesture hit harder than any court filing. I closed my hand around the pen and nodded. "Don't fix the past," I said. "Fix your next choice." She exhaled, shaky but freer. Her phone buzzed. A notification from her mother's PR account lit the screen. She swiped it open, scrolled, then locked the phone with force. Her fingers moved quickly, deliberate. Unfollow. Her eyes lifted to mine. I don't want to be part of her narrative anymore. The clouds broke for a moment. Light poured across the skyline. For the first time in weeks, Lily stood taller, as if the shame she carried had begun to lift. The fracture between generations was visible, but so was the path forward. We walked down from Cary Park in silence, the sound of the city rising to meet us. Lily had drawn her line, and I knew the fight had shifted, not just against misuse of money, but against a legacy of fear and control. The crack was there, but in it, something new could grow. The late afternoon wind swept across Cary Park, lifting hair, tugging jackets, carrying the city's cold straight to the skin. From where we stood, the skyline looked unreal. Steel, glass, and light piled against a mountain backdrop, half buried in cloud. Tourists laughed, posed, snapped pictures. None of it touched Lily. She stood at the railing, arms crossed, head bent low, like the city below might swallow her if she let it. I waited, letting the silence stretch. She had asked to meet me here, not at home, not at school. That choice told me enough. Something heavy needed air. Finally, she turned, eyes rimmed red. "Grandma, I need to tell you something," she said, voice fraying at the edges. I didn't rush her. Truth surfaces best when it isn't forced. She looked away toward the sound, watching ferries cut across the gray water. Last spring, Mom made me sign a letter. It was supposed to be an acknowledgement for a scholarship I got. Only, there was no scholarship. She said it was optics, that it would make the foundation look active. She told me not to worry, that no one would ever check. So I signed. Her voice broke. I didn't ask questions. I didn't fight. I just did it. And every time I think about it, I feel dirty, like I helped her cheat. I hate that I went along. The wind shoved against us. She clutched her jacket tighter. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a pen. Black lacquer, brass clip, worn from years of my hand. I had given it to her when she finished middle school, a promise that her words would matter if she chose to use them. She stared at it for a long second, then pressed it into my palm. "I don't deserve this anymore," she whispered. "I'll earn it, on my own terms." I closed my fingers around the pen, felt the weight of both metal and confession. My voice stayed firm. "Don't fix the past. Fix your next choice." Her chin lifted, trembling but determined. For the first time, she met my eyes without flinching. A group of children ran past, their parents laughing behind them, the sound briefly breaking the heaviness. Lily pulled out her phone, the screen lighting up with her mother's latest PR post, some staged photo, all polish, no substance. She stared at it, thumb hovering, then tapped. Unfollow. She exhaled, not relief exactly, but release. The generational crack was wide now, undeniable. Yet in that space, something truer could take root. We turned from the skyline together. The city lights blinked on one by one, as if answering her decision. Lily walked a little taller, not because her burden was gone, but because she had chosen which side of the line she would stand on. The fracture had come, and with it, her beginning. The fallout began to show itself in places that once defined their control. Not in headlines yet, but in the spaces where silence usually hid missteps. I saw it unfold like a sequence of doors slamming shut. Jackson Hole came first, a cold valley under early snow. The chalet site, frames half raised, insulation stacked against tarps, fell silent. I stood far enough to watch, unseen. A crane sat idle. Workers packed their tools, the air filled with the metallic clank of chains being wound. The foreman lifted his phone, voice sharp. "We're on hold." His words carried through the wind. Colin stood a few feet away, shoulders heavy inside his tailored coat, breath pushing white clouds into the cold. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. He only muttered, low and defeated. "Copy." From the mountains to the city, the image cracked. In Bellevue, their Range Rover appeared on a dealership listing. Photos shot under fluorescent light, each angle designed to erase personal history. The leather seats looked polished, but the caption below told the truth. Pre-owned, priced to move. I imagined Sloane's hand once on that wheel, rehearsing her speeches in the mirror of the rear view. Now the mirror belonged to strangers. Emails followed. One from a corporate client. Large, lucrative, unforgiving. The subject line carried no preamble. Termination of engagement. They cited risk, instability, governance concerns. The language was sanitized, but the meaning was blunt. They would no longer associate with Sloane's brand. Caleb printed it out and slid it across Ruth's desk. She didn't comment, she didn't need to. The paper said enough. Then came Vivian. She boarded a flight at SeaTac with a single suitcase. A woman known for luggage towers now carried only one shell of a bag. A flight tracker pinged her departure for Dallas. Caleb's contact at the airline confirmed her seat. Economy plus window. No assistant beside her. When she landed, a courier waited with another notice of production. Vivian walked through Love Field Terminal without lipstick, her face pale under the fluorescent lights. For once, no cameras followed. I tracked each crack not with glee, but with precision. These were the outcomes of choices long made, costs deferred until the bill arrived in full. And now, it did. At night, I sat at my kitchen table. My phone buzzed. A bank notification glowed across the screen. Restitution schedule proposed. The subject line pulsed like a heartbeat. Inside the message, a wire timetable, amounts itemized, escrow identified. Numbers moving not as promises, but as obligation. I leaned back in my chair, the lamplight pooling across the paperwork spread before me. Outside, Seattle rain tapped the window, steady and cold. The chain of cost was visible now, not rumor, not narrative, not spin. Stone by stone, the facade had fallen. They had built their house on optics. I built mine on ledgers, and ledgers do not lie. The night stretched quiet, the phone's glow fading into dark. For the first time since the freeze, I felt the weight tilt in my direction. Not victory, but consequence made real. The countdown clock still ran, but now it ran on my terms. The morning smelled of salt and coffee as I walked down to Pike Place. The crowd pressed in around fishmongers and flower stalls, but my steps led below, to the vaults where the quiet work happened. A safe deposit clerk checked my ID, logged the time, and led me to a narrow booth. The walls hummed faintly, insulated steel around steel. The box slid forward, heavy and cold. I turned the dial, Click, 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 each turn louder than the market above. Inside lay a single folder sealed with ribbon. I lifted it out and set it on the desk. The words on the cover were plain: Deed of Assignment. Ruth sat across from me, her glasses low, pen uncapped. Caleb stood behind her, holding a ledger under his arm. I broke the ribbon and spread the pages wide. The assignment transferred controlling interest of the trust, the piece they had fought over, spun, hidden, into the Cascadia Apprenticeship Fund in Lane County. Not to me, not to my daughter, not to Vivian's narratives, to the program that built calloused hands and steady wages. Caleb read it once, lips moving silently. His voice held steady when he spoke. This places administration under the fund's bylaws. I'll assume interim executive duties. The board will seat community representatives. I nodded. The money goes where it should have gone from the start. Ruth pressed her pen to the page. Not revenge, she said. Governance. Legacy isn't a brand, I answered. It's work that survives us. The pen scratched against paper. Ruth signed as witness. Caleb signed as executor. I pressed my name last, slow and deliberate. Ink dried darker than resolve. The deed was complete. We carried it upstairs into the thin winter light. Outside, Hector waited by a van, engine idling. He had driven apprentices from Springfield every week, hauling them before dawn so they could train on real equipment. His hands were black with grease, his eyes ringed with fatigue. But when Caleb handed him the copy of the assignment, he grinned like a man who finally had ground to stand on. I'll keep driving them, Hector said. Now I can tell them the fund is safe. We followed him to the fund's office. Modest brick, not glass, a door with peeling paint. Workers inside cleared a wall for a new sign. The drill whined, screws bit into wood, and fresh letters mounted. Cascadia Apprenticeship Fund, Lane County Branch. The sound carried more weight than applause. A name restored, a purpose written in bolts and paint. Ruth held her phone, tapping quickly. An email left her outbox with the subject. Board recorded, assignment registered. Confirmation pinged within seconds. The state had logged the change. The community owned the trust now, not a family obsessed with optics. I stepped back and watched Hector wave the apprentices in. Boots scraped the floor, jackets hung on hooks. Laughter filled the hallway. None of them cared about brands or spin. They cared about tools, lessons, hours logged, checks cashed. The trust was no longer leverage. It was lifeblood again. The street smelled of roasted nuts and diesel. Pike Place crowds surged, oblivious to the shift in power under their feet. But I knew. I had felt the steel box open, heard the dial lock back into place, watched signatures turn into governance. They had fought for image. I gave it back to work. And for the first time, the trust was no longer mine to defend. It belonged to the hands that would use it. Ruth's office smelled of paper, ink, and the faint tang of steel from the safe behind her desk. The blinds were half drawn, letting only strips of downtown light fall across the conference table. At the center lay 3 documents in heavy cream stock: restitution agreement, waiver of claims, acknowledgement of audit. Each page bore tabs where signatures were required. Sloan entered first, Colin close behind. Their polished composure had dulled. Sloan still wore her PR smile, but it cracked when her eyes caught the word waiver bolded in the header. Colin carried a briefcase he clutched too tight, knuckles pale. Vivian arrived last. No entourage, no gloss of power, only hesitation in the doorway, as if she wasn't certain she belonged anymore. Ruth remained seated, her presence like stone. Caleb set a notary seal at her right hand and opened a folder of bank receipts. I sat opposite the 3 of them, silent, watching. Ruth spoke first. These agreements are plain. Restitution within 30 days, wired in full. Waiver of all claims against Mrs. Bennett and the trust. Acknowledgement that funds diverted to Jackson and Plano were misapplied. Sign, and the court will not need to meet you. Refuse, and discovery begins. Silence. The wall clock ticked. The city's hum pressed through the glass. Colin exhaled, opened his briefcase, and produced a Mont Blanc. His hand shook as he uncapped it. He bent over the first page. His signature scrawled uneven, ink blotting slightly at the tail. He slid the pen to Sloane without looking at her. She forced a laugh, brittle. "Do you realize how this looks?" "No," I said evenly. "I realize how it reads." Her eyes locked on mine. Then she bent down, smile gone, and signed with a stroke that bit the paper. Only Vivian remained. She sat stiff, hands folded, eyes fixed on the waiver. The silence stretched until Ruth reached for a second folder. She slid it across the table and opened it. Inside, a subpoena draft, already stamped, ready to file in Dallas County. The target line read, Vivian Lane, Magnolia Meridian Consulting, LLC. Ruth's voice did not rise. "If you will not sign, this leaves here today." Vivian's breath hitched. For the first time, her face betrayed fear. She reached for the pen with trembling fingers. The nib scratched across paper, hesitant at first, then firmer. Her initials at each margin, her name at the bottom, ink that ended the shadow games. Ruth pressed the notary seal against each page with a heavy thud. The embossed marks shone under the light like scars. Caleb collected the documents, checked the signatures, then nodded once. He opened his laptop, already tethered to the bank portal. Wire instructions appeared on the screen. Routing numbers, amounts, escrow account labeled Cascadia Apprenticeship Fund. Colin typed, hands stiff, and hit submit. A pause, then the screen shifted. Transfer complete. Restitution received. The confirmation code glowed like a verdict. Ruth leaned back, folding her hands. "The court won't need to meet you, if you meet your obligations." Sloane stared at the screen, her jaw locked. Colin sagged in his chair. Vivian kept her eyes on the floor, lips pressed thin. I rose slowly, gathering my folio. "Justice doesn't shout," I said. "It signs." The documents lay between us, ink still drying, proof that power built on fraud can be dismantled by steady hands. The meeting ended not with applause, but with the sound of obligation sealed in black and white. The fight was not for theater, it was for truth, and now the truth was signed. The morning light poured through wide barn windows, catching dust and sawdust in golden beams. The Lane County workshop hummed again, machines alive, voices rising, the smell of pine thick in the air. Where silence once marked absence, now sound filled the gaps. I walked the floor slowly, eyes moving from bench to bench. Hector had just swung open the van doors, his voice booming as he called names. Apprentices stepped down, clutching lunch sacks, some still yawning from the long ride up from Springfield. He waved them in, grease-stained jacket bright under the sun, his grin as wide as ever. Lily stood by the entrance with a cardboard box of gloves. She held them out, one by one, checking sizes, tugging cuffs into place. Her face was steady, her shoulders square. Not a child covering lies anymore, but a young woman showing up for truth. Each student left her hand with a small nod of thanks. I stopped at a safety station, checked the guards on a saw, adjusted the shield on a lathe. The noise of the planer whined, then settled into rhythm. A boy no older than 17 pressed a board through, stiff arms, careful eyes. His first pass was rough. I lifted the plank when he finished and traced the line of a split that ran clear down the grain. He flushed, ashamed. I shook my head lightly. "Cracks mean it rose right," I said. I turned the plank in the light, showing the shimmer of strength still in it. "This wood held storms before it met your hands. What matters now is what you make of it." He smiled, hesitant but real. Around him, other students laughed shyly as they tested drills and sanders. The air filled with the scent of sawdust, oil, and promise. Above the door, a new sign hung straight and true, its bolts biting deep into brick. Cascadia Apprenticeship Fund. The letters caught the sunlight, casting shadows sharp on the wall. Where once there was only talk of optics, here stood proof. Metal and wood, joined by hands that would carry the work forward. Ruth visited briefly, folder in hand. She watched a group testing clamps and said quietly to me, "Governance holds. The rest will follow." Caleb checked off equipment inventories, his handwriting precise as always. Every tick on his clipboard sounded like repair being logged into history. Lily finished her gloves, then came to stand at my side. She looked across the workshop, eyes catching the faces, the laughter, the sparks of small victories. She did not speak. She didn't need to. I let the noise fill me. This was not revenge. This was return. The day pressed on, sunlight carrying sawdust high into the beams. The shop floor gleamed with movement, and as I stepped back, I knew this was warmth in the right place. Not in speeches or magazines, but in calloused hands holding futures. When the last board was stacked and the apprentices wiped sweat from their brows, I stepped out into the cool afternoon. The sun had dipped behind clouds, and the air smelled of rain moving in. By evening, I drove north. The ferry cut across the sound, its deck wet with spray, gulls crying overhead. When I reached Port Townsend, the road narrowed under gray sky. I walked up to the cottage door, key in hand. The lock turned with a clean click. The hinges creaked as the door swung open into quiet light. My house smelled of cedar and tide. The workshop behind me rang with hammers. The cottage before me waited with silence. The warmth was where it belonged, and for the first time in years, I stepped inside without weight on my shoulders. The cottage sat quiet above Admiralty Inlet, gulls circling low, the water below bruised with evening tide. Inside, the kitchen carried the scent of lemon and thyme. I had simmered broth earlier, just enough to warm the air. The clock ticked steady on the mantel. No chaos, no boardrooms, no subpoenas. Only the steady rhythm of a home that had outlasted storms. My phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit with a message from Sloan. "Can you share the recipe?" No greeting, no excuses, no demands, just the question. For a moment, I stared at it, remembering the Thanksgiving table, the silence that followed her words. "We've decided you're done." And yet, here she was, reaching not for money, not for leverage, but for something ordinary, something human. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I reached for a blank recipe card from the drawer. The paper felt rough against my hand, textured like the boards in Eugene, imperfect but real. I uncapped a pen and began to write. Pumpkin chiffon pie, eggs separated, sugar measured, lemon zest grated fine. Don't cover cinnamon with too much sugar. Let it breathe. And when it bakes, remember, cracks on top mean it rose right. I paused, the pen hovering. Then I added one final line at the bottom, for the next Thanksgiving, if we earn it. I slid the card into an envelope, sealed it, and wrote Lily's name on the front. She would keep it safe. She would know that recipes are more than ingredients. They are choices passed forward. The kitchen window glowed faintly as the sky dimmed. I lit a small candle and set it on the sill. The flame flickered against the glass, bending in the draft, then steadied. From outside, it would look like a beacon in the gray, small, but certain. I stood by the counter, hands resting on the wood worn smooth by years. My voice in my own head was low, grounded, not triumphant. Justice doesn't need applause, it needs a steady hand. The phone buzzed again. I didn't look this time. Some doors close hard, but others can be left ajar, only if those outside earn the step in. That choice, like the pie, would rise or fall with cracks that told the truth. I left the envelope by Lily's chair at the table, then blew out the stove flame. The candle in the window kept burning, one light against the dark, not for show, not for praise, just for proof that warmth, when placed right, endures. And with that, I let the night take the rest. The inlet rolled steady below, the cottage walls held firm, and the chapter ended not with noise, but with quiet strong enough to last.